Have you ever noticed how sometimes life feels like a game that we never chose to play? Well, for Jun Hee, player 222 of Squid Game, that was never a metaphor. It was reality. She was not there out of ambition, nor for pleasure. She was there because desperation leaves no choices. And what hurts the most is that many people will relate to this. Jun Hee is the kind of character who carries in her eyes the weight of someone who has already endured too much in life. A woman trying to survive, pregnant, alone, and afraid of being forgotten. And do you know what impresses me the most? It is how, in the midst of so much chaos, there was still room for love, for guilt, and for hope, even if it was an almost extinguished spark. That is why understanding Jun Hee's mind is not just about understanding the series. It is about understanding ourselves and what we do when we are pushed to the limit. If you are a fan of cinema, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss any video. But first, comment below which character you want me to analyze on the channel. Now, let's go to the video. Jun Hee, player 222. A name that might go unnoticed among so many lost faces in the chaos of Squid Game, but just one look is enough to realize she carries the weight of the world on her shoulders. Before all this, she was not a criminal, nor a bad person, just someone trying to survive a reality that never played in her favor. And when the game begins, what hurts her the most is not the fear of death, it is the fear of finally having nothing left to fight for. She enters the game with a look that mixes despair and exhaustion, the kind of look only those who have fought too much know. Behind the emotional scars, there is a woman who learned to harden herself so as not to collapse. You know that type of person who makes jokes about themselves to hide the pain. Jun Hee is exactly like that. She smiles, but the laughter is armor. Because when the world hurts you so much, humor becomes the only way to still feel alive. The most curious thing is that even inside a game of death, she does not lose the ability to connect. It seems contradictory, right? But it is precisely in the middle of chaos that people like her flourish, because those who have lost everything understand the value of any crumb of humanity. Jun Hee is not an ordinary player. She is the portrait of people whom life forces to mature before their time, and that shapes everything that comes next. There is something almost poetic in the way she faces danger. It is not pure courage, it is resignation mixed with instinct. That feeling of "I have been through worse." It is as if death is just another possibility among so many other losses she has already faced. And that says a lot about who she is, someone who learned to live on the edge between giving up and trying once more. Jun Hee carries with her a type of silent pain, the kind that does not scream but weighs in every gesture. It is the kind of pain that turns a person into a survivor by habit. She does not chase dreams, she chases relief. And that is the heart of her story. A woman trying to find a reason to keep fighting, even when hope seems to have hidden from her a long time ago. Before entering Squid Game, she already lived another kind of game, the real-life one, where every choice comes at a high cost. Pregnancy, abandonment, the constant fear of being forgotten, all this unfolds like a script she never asked to star in. But inside the game, these old wounds resurface in an even more brutal way. And the most interesting thing is that Jun Hee does not try to hide her weaknesses. She carries them like someone carries an old suitcase. Heavy, yes, but full of memories she cannot let go. It is this vulnerability that makes her such a human, tangible character. She is imperfect, and perhaps that is exactly why we identify with her so much. But there is a part of her story that changes everything, something that redefines her relationship with life, fear, and love, something that begins inside her, literally, a secret that carries the weight of two hearts beating under the same body. It's the weight of responsibility and fear of the future. Jun Hee's pregnancy is more than a physical condition, it is an emotional mirror. Carrying a life inside her while fighting to maintain her own is a cruel irony. She enters the game trying to hide her belly, but what she is really trying to hide is fear. Fear of not being able to be what the baby needs, and perhaps even more, the fear of repeating the story of abandonment that life has already shown her so many times. You know when you feel like the world is about to collapse, but you need to keep smiling so as not to scare those nearby. That is more or less what Jun Hee does. For her, pregnancy is not just hope, it is also a sentence. Every heartbeat of the baby is a reminder that time is running, and that she needs to be strong even when everything inside her screams to give up. There is something profoundly symbolic in this, her body trying to generate life while the world around her works to destroy everything that still lives. It is almost a living paradox, a walking metaphor for what it is to be a woman in a system that demands strength even when you are broken. The gestation, in her case, is the last act of resistance, and it is curious how this maternal instinct, even born from fear, ends up being what keeps her standing the most. Jun Hee no longer fights only for herself. She fights for someone who does not yet know what pain is, and that changes everything. Because when we have someone to protect, courage comes from a place we did not even know existed. Fear does not disappear but learns to walk alongside determination. The weight of being a mother in a world that does not nurture is almost unbearable. But Jun Hee transforms this weight into momentum. She has no luxury, no comfort, no security, only the desperate desire to give her child a better chance than hers. It is a simple desire, but devastating. And sometimes it is this kind of silent love that screams the loudest. The most touching thing is that the pregnancy is not shown as something beautiful or romantic, but real. She feels pain, weakness, fear of fainting, fear of dying, and yet continues, because deep down, her motherhood is not idealized. It is survivor. It is the raw portrait of someone who has no choice but still chooses to love. And there is something very human in this duality, the will to live and the fear of losing everything at the same time. Jun Hee lives in constant contradiction, loving what is yet to be born, but fearing what this love might cost. It is as if every step inside the game is also a step inside herself, confronting her own limits. And in the middle of all this chaos, there is a detail that begins to gain space: loneliness. Because even with a new life growing inside her, Jun Hee still feels an enormous emptiness. And it is in this emotional hole that the next conflict is born: the fear of being alone. The fear of being alone, abandonment, and the need to be loved. Jun Hee has that kind of fear that makes no noise but consumes from the inside. The fear of being alone. It is not just about not having someone nearby. It is about not being seen, not being remembered, not being important to anyone. It is the kind of loneliness that does not depend on the physical presence of someone, but on the emotional absence of everyone. Even before the game, she already carried this feeling of being surrounded but invisible. When we look at her, we can feel that this fear was born a long time ago. Perhaps from a childhood marked by rejection, or from relationships that promised shelter and brought more storms. The truth is that Jun Hee learned to attach herself too quickly because loneliness always seemed worse than any disappointment. And who has never done that right? Sometimes we accept crumbs just so we do not feel the emptiness again. The problem is that this need to be loved creates a trap. She begins to confuse attention with affection and company with love. And this is common for many people, especially for those who spent their lives trying to deserve the minimum. Jun Hee becomes vulnerable precisely because she wants what every human being wants: a little warmth, a little care. Only that in the world she lives in, even that becomes a form of currency. Inside Squid Game, this fear intensifies. Each elimination is a cruel reminder that at any moment she could be alone again. And it is not just about losing allies. It is about losing the few bonds that still make sense. She tries to disguise it with sarcasm, laughter, and offhand remarks. But behind every joke, there is a silent plea. Please, do not leave me. It is almost ironic. The game was made to isolate. But it is in this isolation that she desperately seeks connection. And this is where the audience identifies. Because everyone, at some point, has felt the fear of being forgotten. Jun Hee represents that part of us that wants to believe that, even in the worst circumstances, someone will stay. Someone will look inside and say, I see you. But the problem is that the fear of being alone also makes us make bad decisions. We accept what we should not, trust those who do not deserve it, insist on relationships that should have ended long ago. And this is the point where her story begins to intertwine with another name, Myungjia, a bond that mixes need, hope, and destruction in dangerously human doses. Jun Hee does not approach him out of naivety, but out of necessity. She needs to believe that she can still be loved even in the midst of death. And this hope, although beautiful, is also what puts her most at risk, because sometimes the fear of being alone is so strong that it makes us accept any company, even the wrong one. The relationship with Myung-ji, love, dependence, and emotional pain. The relationship between Jun Hee and Myung-ji is the type of bond that is born from desperation, two broken souls trying to cling to each other so as not to sink alone. At first, it seems that there is a strange kind of protection. She sees him as someone strong, capable of providing safety in a place where no one is trustworthy. But deep down, it is just another desperate attempt not to feel alone. Love for Jun, he has always been a shelter that collapses. Myung-ji, on the other hand, represents chaos disguised as stability. He is unpredictable, explosive, and uses fear as a form of control. Still, she stays. She stays because in some distorted way, he makes her feel needed. It is that dynamic so common off-screen, when love hurts, but loneliness hurts more. And she, tired of being abandoned, prefers the hell she knows to the void she fears. It is interesting to observe how Jun Hee tries to justify his behavior. She says he is difficult, that life made him this way. It is the classic emotional trap of someone who learned to love by trying to fix the other. And the worst part is that in the midst of the terror of the game, this bond becomes a tightrope sustained by fear, guilt, and a strange form of loyalty. Deep down, she believes that if she loves enough, he will change. But love does not change anyone, especially when it is born from need and not choice. Jun Hee, at this point, is almost a living metaphor for all the unbalanced relationships we insist on maintaining. You know when you think you can save someone. She lives exactly that. And, without realizing it, she begins to lose herself trying to be the foundation of someone who does not want to be supported. Even with abuse, constant fear, and humiliation, there is a moment when she still defends him. Not out of naivety, but out of attachment. Because when love becomes survival, the mind confuses pain with affection. Jun, he believes that being with Myung-ji is better than facing the game completely alone. And, in a way, this thought destroys her the most, because it keeps her trapped emotionally and physically. It is impossible not to see there the portrait of so many people who live toxic relationships off-screen. The way she looks at him, how she tries to please, how she blames herself for his outbursts of anger. All of this reveals an invisible but brutal power dynamic. It is emotional violence disguised as love, and yet there are moments when she looks at him with a kind of tenderness that hurts to see because it shows how much she still wants to believe that love can heal. Deep down, Jun Hee knows that Myung-ji is dangerous, but admitting this would be the same as facing her own emptiness. And that is why she holds on tight, even when there is nothing left to hold on to. It is as if her body asks to flee, but her heart still murmurs. Wait a little longer, and in that waiting, she begins to fade. But something begins to change when the weight of guilt settles in, when she realizes that the love she feels is costing more than it should. That is when a new conflict is born inside her guilt, that feeling that begins to corrode everything from within, and that will guide her through the next decisions. Guilt, the burden of one's own choices. Guilt is an old acquaintance of Jun Hee. It does not arrive all at once. It infiltrates slowly among her thoughts until it takes over everything. At first, it is that little voice whispering, "You should have done differently," but soon it becomes a constant scream. She blames herself for entering the game, for trusting Myung-ji for not protecting the baby as she should. And the cruelest part is that, even without choice, she still feels that everything is her fault. You know, when we spend so much time taking responsibility for things we cannot control that we start to believe we are the problem itself, that is exactly it. Jun, he lives this cycle. Every mistake, every loss is proof in her mind that she is not good enough. And that is what destroys her silently. Because guilt, unlike pain, does not pass with time. It settles in. Inside the game, this feeling becomes even more intense. With each death, with each betrayal, Jun, he feels that the blood of others splashes on her as well. It is the kind of guilt that comes not only from actions, but from intentions. Even when she tries to do the right thing, the result is tragic. And deep down, she begins to believe that she is cursed, that wherever she goes, suffering follows. The most interesting thing is how guilt disguises itself as responsibility. She tries to fix everything, please everyone, maintain peace, and ends up forgetting herself. It is that typical behavior of someone who wants to compensate their own pain by caring for others. But the problem is that no one can carry the world on their shoulders forever. Eventually, the weight breaks. In many moments, you can see in her eyes this internal conflict. It is as if every choice comes with a painful question. What if I had done differently? But the game leaves no room for regret. It is survival or nothing. Even so, she hesitates, feels, overthinks, and it is in overthinking that suffering multiplies. And the curious thing is that, despite the guilt, she does not play the victim. On the contrary, Jun, he is the kind of person who tries to move forward, even shattered. And that is what makes the characters so human, because who has never blamed themselves for something they could not control? Who has never looked back and thought they could have done better, said more, loved differently? But guilt also has a perverse side. It paralyzes. She begins to believe that she does not deserve forgiveness nor a future. And when someone comes close, she distances herself, not out of coldness, but out of fear of hurting again. It is self-sabotage disguised as self-protection, and this is a difficult cycle to break because the more guilt she feels, the more isolated she becomes. And it is in this isolation, in this growing emotional weight, that something inside her changes. When regret mixes with desperation, a primitive, almost animal instinct is born, simply to survive. And that is when her story enters its rawest phase, when pain becomes impulse and desperation takes control. Desperation when survival becomes instinct. There comes a point when Jun Hee stops thinking and begins reacting. Desperation takes over, but not in the hysterical way we imagine. It is a cold, calculated, almost mechanical desperation, the kind of desperation that is born when the body decides to act even though the mind has already given up. She is no longer fighting to win the game. She is fighting to exist for one more minute. And that difference changes everything. Her desperation is the rawest portrait of the human condition. When life pushes you to the limit, you discover that there is still a side of yourself you never knew, a side capable of doing anything to not disappear. Jun, he reaches this point, and, in a way, it is painful to watch, because it is not courage, it is necessity. It is not strength, it is instinct. It is the kind of survival that demands a high price, a piece of the soul with every choice. There are moments when her gaze seems empty, as if the body is there, but the mind has gone away. This gaze is familiar to those who have experienced extreme situations when trauma disconnects us from our own reality to avoid collapsing. She is in automatic mode, and in this mode, there is no right or wrong. There is only what needs to be done. And the most tragic part is that, even so, she still carries a trace of humanity. Even with hunger, fear, and anger, there are still moments when she hesitates. She still looks at others with empathy. She still feels guilt for surviving when someone dies. This shows that no matter how destroyed she is, there is something inside her that insists on remembering what it means to be human. This contrast between instinct and emotion is what makes Jun Hee so fascinating. It is as if two versions of her are constantly fighting, one that wants to live at any cost and another that only wants peace. This duality creates constant tension, because within Squid Game, living at the expense of others, pain is inevitable, and she knows it, but knowing does not make it easier. Desperation also makes her unpredictable. She begins to act impulsively, make decisions that even she does not understand afterward. It is that moment when the mind says no, but the body has already gone. It is pure emotional survival, something many people experience off-screen in situations that demand more than they can give. And this constant state of alert leaves marks that do not fade with time. The irony is that desperation, as dark as it may seem, is also what keeps her alive. It is the engine that drives her when everything else fails. And this raises a very human question. How far would you go to stay standing? Which part of you would have to die so that the rest survives? These are questions that echo not only in her, but in all of us. And when the dust begins to settle and instinct gives way to silence, that is when the next impact comes. Realizing what this desperation has done to her, because survival has a price, and Jun Hee is about to face the emotional bill of everything she has lived. Jun Hee is the result of every scar she tried to hide. She is not the kind of character born complete. She is shaped by the impact of her own wounds. Each trauma leaves a mark that defines not only how she acts, but also how she feels. Forced motherhood made her protective, abandonment made her needy, guilt made her reserved, and desperation made her resilient. Deep down, she is a mosaic of pains that, together, form a strength she does not fully understand. The way she relates to the world is a direct consequence of fear. She approaches people too quickly, but never fully surrenders. It is a constant attempt to balance vulnerability and self-protection. I want to be close, but without getting hurt. And who has never done that? This oscillation between wanting to be loved and fearing being hurt is so human that it hurts to acknowledge. The traumas also shape the way she sees love. For Jun Hee, loving is synonymous with danger. That is why she clings as if trying to hold a dream with trembling hands. She does not love by rational choice. She loves by instinct. And that is precisely why her relationships are intense, chaotic, and often self-destructive. She wants to feel alive, even if it costs another piece of her own sanity. Another remarkable point is the way she deals with pain. Jun Hee learned to laugh at what destroys her, and this is a powerful defense. Humor becomes a shield, sarcasm becomes a refuge. But behind this apparent lightness, there is a deep fear of collapsing. She jokes so she does not cry. And, in some way, this resonates with many people who swallow what they feel, trying to turn tragedy into emotional survival. These traumas also explain why she becomes unpredictable. Sometimes she is sweet, other times aggressive. One day she wants to open up, the next she wants to disappear. It is the behavior of someone who lives on alert, someone who never knows when the next blow will come. And that is sad, but real. When the world teaches that trusting hurts, we learn to always walk with one foot back. Even so, there is something admirable in Jun Hee, the ability to continue. Even when the past weighs heavily, even when guilt suffocates, she keeps going. It is the kind of resilience that does not come from strength, but from exhaustion. She does not want to win the game. She just wants to prove to herself that she can still get up. And this silent strength is what makes her so remarkable. The most beautiful and painful thing is that all these traumas make her a complex woman, full of nuances. She is neither a heroine nor a villain. She is human, a survivor who makes mistakes, loves, cries, and tries again. Jun Hee is the mirror of many people who have learned to live with cracks and, yet, continue searching for a little light among the debris. And it is in this complexity, this mix of strength and fragility, that the deepest point of her journey emerges, reflection on what it really means to survive. Because sometimes surviving is not being alive. It is just continuing to exist, waiting for the moment to finally breathe in peace. In the end, Jun Hee is not just a player, she is a raw portrait of what remains of us when everything we love is taken away. She does not win the game, but she wins the internal silence that consumed her. And perhaps this is the greatest possible victory for someone who spent their whole life fighting their own emptiness. In her eyes, there is something that money could never buy, the courage to have faced the worst and still continue feeling. But the most curious thing is that, behind all the pain, there is still a glimmer of hope. Not that grand, cinematic hope, but a small spark, almost imperceptible. As if, even after everything, she still believes she can be loved, that she can start over. This contradiction is what makes her story so powerful. She lost everything, but did not lose the ability to feel. The game may have ended, but the real battlefield continues inside her. Every memory, every guilt, every gesture becomes a reminder that survival has a price, and hers was far too high. Still, there is something in the way she breathes, the way she faces the void, that makes us think. Perhaps survival is not the end, but the beginning of a new kind of life. And that is when the shock comes, realizing that what happened to Jun Hee is not just fiction. Her loneliness, her fear, her desperation, all of this echoes in the reality of many people. How many people live every day trapped in their own games, trying to survive routine, demands, and invisible pains? The difference is that the prize here is not money, it is peace. This is the kind of story that does not end when the screen goes dark. It continues with us. It makes us question what we would do in her place, and, more deeply, what we are doing with our own lives. Because, in the end, the real Squid Game may be the world outside, where everyone plays, but few realize they are playing, and when we understand this, something inside changes. Jun Hee's story stops being just a tragedy and becomes a mirror, an uncomfortable mirror, yes, but necessary, because sometimes we need to see the reflection of our own suffering in a character to finally understand what needs to change within us. And while her face disappears among the shadows of the game, one question lingers in the air. What happens after you survive? What remains of a person when fear and guilt finally fall silent? Perhaps the answer lies less in winning and more in finding yourself again. And that is precisely why, before any analysis, before any theory, it is necessary to look at Jun Hee with a bit of humanity, because understanding her is understanding a silent piece of ourselves. So, what did you think of Jun Hee's story? Did you also feel the weight she carries? This mix of loneliness, fear, and the will to keep fighting even when everything seems lost? Tell me here in the comments, which part of her journey impacted you the most? And of course, which character do you want me to analyze in the next video? We will continue diving into the minds and hearts of Squid Game characters and so many other worlds that deep down reflect our own. So, if you enjoy this type of deep and human analysis, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next videos. Because in the end, understanding the characters is a way of understanding ourselves.